So yeah, as I said, my name is Ian Chambers. What I want to give you a bit of perspective on is my sort of belief in virtual reality. You know, I'm a gamer first, then I've been in publishing at EA and Ubisoft, and then in media at IGN. But for me, virtual reality, you know, is a divided opinion on this. Me personally, I think this is going to change the way people interact with each other and with companies, and I think it will be very interesting. That's some of the examples we want to give you today. The VR has had a rocky past. It's probably the best way of putting it. You know, there's been ups and downs. Opinion is divided, but the hype is there now. And you know, should we believe this hype? Well, no one can answer that if they tell you they're a liar. But you can't predict the future. Some people have tried in the past. So here's the clicker and the black screen of the person I was not meant to be seeing. Oh, did I click the wrong way?
Click down.
Click down. No, it's on the screen. No. There we go. The down button it is. Right. This is some postcards I'm very fond of from the year 1900, drawn by a French artist called Jean-Marc Coetet. It was his vision of the year 2000 in 1901. And he did a pretty good job about predicting the future. So here he is predicting what he called correspondent cinema, the video conference. This one, La Gazette du 21e siècle, the newspaper of the 21st century, beamed through your gramophone. We got to that one pretty easily, the wireless or the radio. Some would agree this one's happening, which is the printed word being mashed up, digitized, and then put into the brains of our children through technology. I think that's quite pertinent. Unfortunately, no whale submarines yet, which is sort of something. But this is virtual reality, so there's the idea for your next blockbuster game. So what can help us understand whether VR is going to be successful? So there's various research studies, people talk about things, analysts, all the rest of it. There's an interesting hype graph called the Gartner hype cycle, which we can use to help give us some direction. I promise this is the only boring slide in the presentation. It does come back later though. So, technology trigger. Something happens, a moment happens where there's a breakthrough in technology, in thought, the eureka moment. Everyone gets extremely excited and runs off telling this is the best thing since sliced bread. But there's just proof of concepts. So you can think right now we're kind of autonomous cars are sitting in this area down here. And then everyone gets a bit more excited, some proof of concepts turn into real things. There's lots of failures as well, but lots of successes, and we get this peak of inflated expectations where the world's going to change. And then suddenly interest starts waning. Things don't go so well, some of the things fall over. People start questioning their belief in terms of, is this actually going to work? And then you end up in this nasty trough of disillusionment down here. So, great example of one sitting right in that trough at the moment is 3D TV. You know, everyone thought it was the next best thing, in reality, it's not. But that's not to say it can't ever be. And then what happens here is it needs a second wave, a second, third generation, another application for that product, better content, or whatever else it is that helps catapult that technology up the slope and then into this plateau of productivity. And that's where you have mainstream adoption, and essentially it's a success. And so you can look at smartphones, tablets, of course, anything living in that space over there. Now, we could all argue about where VR sits on this graph. You know, VR, AR, content, hardware, they probably all sit in slightly different places. The way I think about it is that we sort of went over the hill and down in the 90s, and we've been sitting down in this trough for a while, and now we're just coming out the other side with this new technology that comes along. But you could, I'm sure there's many other opinions on where we are. And we'll all remember some of the great ones from the 90s. Your local arcade in your house, and who can forget the infamous Power Glove? You don't make them like that anymore, do they? But things have changed. We're seeing graphs like this in analyst presentations. Everyone's telling us it's going to be 70 billion, 80 billion. I got another one the other day, it's 100 billion, I don't know. Apparently this is going to be it. We're on the way up with virtual reality. Big players are coming into the market. We know about Facebook buying Oculus, Sony with Morpheus, Google, everyone's getting behind it. Microsoft taking a different approach with HoloLens. and of course HTC and Valve combining for the Vive. So all of these players moving, a lot going on. And for anyone who studies this stuff, and a lot of you I'm sure do and know about some of the other technologies, there's literally tens of headsets being developed of different kinds at the moment. Here's 4 more. And there are so many more behind that as well, currently in development. And they're all helping to create experiences that really, for many of us, were science fiction just a few years ago.
Sure. Let's take an experience off the wall and then put it on the table over here. Create world. I see Lydia way up there.
As I run around the place, Zax can easily navigate and manipulate the world using his voice and his hands. He can walk around the hologram, pan around for different viewpoints, and even look inside.
Let's follow Lydia around.
Let's not follow Lydia around. Right. So, this is a technology demonstration at E3, we know that, but it puts you in a position where you think, really, seriously? This is holograms. It's just mind-boggling to think the capability and the potential for what VR and AR mean to us in the future. But what's going to be successful? Like I said, there's so many things in development now. There's something new every single day that we're hearing about. And none of us can answer that question, but is it going to be a tethered experience where you're connected to a PC, a console maybe, a television directly? Who says you need a PC or a console in the future? Is it going to be an untethered experience where you slot in a mobile, like Google Cardboard? There's actually a few in development right now, like GameFace, some of you may know that, where everything is integrated directly into the headset. So no PC, no console, no mobile phone, everything's integrated into the headset. Is it going to be full immersion, where we recreate whatever world we want in VR? Or is it going to be augmented? Is it going to be proprietary content? Or is it going to be open source? Or is it going to be all of these things, or is it going to be none of them? Like I said, none of us can answer that question. We could draw some inspiration from the old days of some technology. Now these are different in the fact they're format wars and based on mainly the content that was in them, but there's some interesting threads that run through these. So the VHS, 2 hours of recording time, you can play home movies on it, beat Betamax. The 8-track versus the cassette. Cassette was promoted as home music. Customers and individuals bought into the cassette player. And of course, more recently, Blu-ray and DVD. And the big studios not getting behind HD DVD in the end and going with Blu-ray, sort of 2008, CEX, Warner, and all that kind of stuff, ultimately led to the demise of HD DVD. So there's many reasons why these succeeded and failed, and you can't take a complete comparison against VR technology, but the thread that runs through all of these is content. That ultimately it was the content, and it will be the content, that will determine the success of these technologies. Now, content for you probably means games, entertainment, gaming experiences, kind of some of the things we do on console or on PC, mobile, and translating it, or kind of the new experiences for these devices. But that's not what I want to talk about today. I'm sure you're going to create some incredible stuff in that area. I can't wait to play it. But actually what I want to talk about is the huge opportunities and beyond games. And what I think is that ultimately this technology could transform the way we interact with companies, and it could transform the way that companies interact with consumers. So I'll give you a few examples before handing over to Seamus. So in education, being able to see inside the human anatomy, being able to walk with dinosaurs for children, being able to go into space. I mean, these are all things we want to do, and they come to life in VR. There are already tests for testing surgery simulations using VR and the ability to go through tricky situations. And there's also people being treated for phobias with progressive exposure to their phobias through VR. Training is one that's been used for a long time, of course, flight simulation training, military training. They've been doing that for quite a while in the VR space, but with consumer headsets, it opens up a whole new world of training capabilities for companies, for health and safety, all sorts of areas that will benefit from training through VR. Virtual tourism. We can't be everywhere all the time. And of course, we can only go this time. You know, I haven't yet worked out how to break space and time, unfortunately. So with virtual tourism, you know, Seamus and I could go to the Colosseum as it is today, but then we could rewind the clock a couple of thousand years and watch a gladiatorial fight. So virtual tourism really comes to life with VR. Engineers are using VR already to test out models, to design in 3D, and actually be able to walk around their designs. I'm sure you've all seen architecture and have thought about this company here. It's Arch Digital. This is colour for source on this one. A company who are already in this space and doing lots of stuff around 3D modelling in VR for architecture. You could be at any ground in the world for any sporting event. That's pretty standard stuff, and there are companies doing that already. Yeah, my vision of this is that ultimately, one, have a head cam, a 360 head cam for players, and if you want to be your favourite sports star, well, you can actually be in them rather than just watching them through a camera. This is a pretty cool example from a couple of months ago, or maybe a few months ago. This couple here, they worked on opposite sides of the country in Australia, which is a long way, of course, and Samsung and Oculus set up a virtual room for this chap so he could watch the birth of his child on the other side of the country. It's the first VR birth. And when I think of Facebook's acquisition of Oculus, this is the vision I think of. This is about bringing social to life and us being able to share moments in past and present through VR. And then last but definitely not least, entertainment. Yeah, we're going to see some incredible entertainment experiences, and I know you're going to do some incredible things in that area. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to dig into one other area, which is media and advertising and branded experiences. And what this gives an opportunity for you as developers to do is that you have all these skills to develop these worlds. And Seamus is going to talk, who has 20 years experience in the advertising space, how we can unite these two great industries around VR.
Hello. Thank you, Ian. My name's Seamus Masterson. I am the Creative Director at Maverick Media. For the last 20 years or so, we've been working with developers and publishers and advertisers to present their games to audiences across the range from core to broad. In our time, we've made anything from in-game content to first-look trailers and cinematics, and onto whole global campaigns across various channels. I'll give you a few bits and bobs we've done. No, I won't. I'll go back and give you a few bits and bobs we've done. So, Total War Warhammer, recent project we worked with Creative Assembly. We did the launch for that. CG, realistic sort of CG mixed with some real life elements. Prior to that, working with Smilegate and Real Time Worlds to create the launch for a game called Sky Saga, which is a kind of Minecrafty, comedic kind of different type of animation completely. We've done lots of work on Little Big Planet through the years. We've worked with Media Molecule, Tarsier, Sumo, all the different studios, and PlayStation, of course, to create more or less anything and everything to do with the games. We've created content, tutorial content, introductory content, TV content. We often use the game engine, obviously, with Little Big Planet. For this particular trailer, we use the game engine to replicate various genres of games throughout the year, built all in the engine, and we added a bit of stop frame animation in there just to complicate the issue a bit further. And we've also done lots and lots in engine, so using a real-time game engine to create linear content. This example is the CryEngine for Crysis, various sort of trailers and content with that. Also did a fair bit in lots of other different engines, Unreal, Unity, lots of proprietary engines as well. So we've kind of been around for a while, most veterans I suppose you'd call us, working with developers and publishers and on the advertising side as well. And something that's kind of struck us throughout all this kind of time really is the idea that we have these two great creative industries in the UK particularly, and that's advertising and game development. And for various reasons, they've never really gelled. And when I say never really gelled, what I mean is they've never really got together to create the content that really plays to the best of what both do, like the interactivity and creativity of the game development community, but also the abilities of advertisers to foster communications and conversations which are relevant to their audiences. And The subject that I'm going to talk about today is actually the possibility that VR could be the element that really links these two great creative industries together and allows them to go on and create some really new and interesting things that we haven't really seen before. So I want to give you three really important ideas for us about why advertisers and brands will really like VR, and then I'm going to talk about what that means in terms of development. My first idea, really, a point, is presence. Now, if you're in here listening to a VR presentation, chances are you know what presence means in VR. But try any sort of VR experience. Presence is one of the main things that probably affect you, I think. And for anyone who doesn't really know what it means or refers to, it's essentially the sense of being in situ to an object, a location, or a person in a realistic way. And many cite it as the most kind of fundamental element of VR that's really affected them in terms of the experience. Now, to explain what that means and the value of that in a communications sense, I'm going to sort of take a little bit of a left turn. I'm just going to put up a definition here. Now, can anyone tell me what that is? It's your own time you're wasting. Yes, thank you very much. That's the definition of an egg. So we get some information on that definition through the written word there. We can kind of understand its shape, etc. When we get to it, you know, we get an understanding of that. Here is a photo of an egg. Now I've got an increased understanding of the egg as a concept here. I don't know when he needs to tell me it's an egg, hopefully. I can see it's photographed in a realistic way. I can see there's a little date on the side that suggests it's been factory farmed or at least gone through some process. I can see some sort of sense of context of a room here. So I'm getting an increased understanding of the concept of the egg here. Now if we go to some video of an egg, and I'm going to get a slightly more increased sense of the world of the egg. Slightly suspiciously heavy breathing of the person filming that, which is a bit worrying. We can see the egg now a bit more. We can see the shape of the egg. We see the light on the egg. We can kind of see the room. We can see that the cameraman's a bit fussy, and he wanted to change the angle of the egg to get a slightly better shot. We can hear something in the background. We can hear sound. We can get some more understanding. That sound is actually my dishwasher in my kitchen, just so you know. And we can probably see just at the end of this moment, yes, I knocked over a glass in the filming of the egg. So we've got a bit more information, understanding from moving media of the egg. Now what I've actually got, and I've taken the liberty of bringing, I did actually raid the kitchen on the way here to grab an egg, and I just wanted to kind of compare the difference in an egg when it's real and when we perceive it's real. I can look at the egg, I can see, I get an understanding, I can see a date on the egg, I can do lots of different things with the egg, and actually I can throw the egg. And in that moment, the gentleman there will realise that actually the egg is not real. And my point is that when we are actually in situ with an object, we can create a greater understanding and a greater reaction from an audience in terms of how they relate to the concept of the egg. Now, obviously, in all instances, the egg is a lie. And all apologies to Portal there, but the point I'm making in a very simplistic way is when you perceive the egg to be real, you have a greater connection to the egg as an object. And that is the fundamental power of presence. If we believe something's in our actual personal space, and we're in situ to it, we can actually create a better connection to the audience and a better reaction from the audience. Not the actual catching of the egg, which is very nicely caught, may I say so. It's the moment of the egg in the air. It's the moment when that egg travels from here to you, where he thought, he's thrown an egg at me. I've come to develop and someone's throwing an egg at me, and it's going to land. And that moment, that connection, that emotive reaction that we created there, just by suggestion and presence. I created a sense of presence. I brought my egg box here. I got my egg box out and I made that connection. I made me feel that the egg was real, but actually it was a conjuring trick, a very, very basic conjuring trick to create a sense of presence. And in a very simplistic way, that is the value of presence across any communication. When we believe something is there beside us and we forget for that moment, our reaction to it and our reaction to any communication that employs it very well can be much more powerful than any other medium that we've since or previously experienced. Now, you may or may not have seen this project. This is a reference to a project called Clouds Over Cedra. Now, we can't obviously show a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about today because obviously it's in VR. But please check these out if you haven't seen them. I'm sure you will see many of the references we have for you today. But they're interesting to talk about why they're done. And Clouds Over Cedra was a project done for UNESCO and by a company called Verse. Really simple. It's documentary coverage, or sort of fly on the wall kind of documentary coverage from the refugee camps in Syria. But when you see it, you connect to it on a much more personal level, because you are there with the people. You feel you are there, and you feel you're connected in that same space. And as a result, it feels much more powerful than all the hours of written words and reporters standing with people in the background and flyover cameras of massive refugee camps, because we connect to it on a personal level. And that's why they created this piece of content, because they wanted the people at the World Economic Forum to understand this big problem on a personal level. And that is the power of presence. It can take any piece of communication and make it reach you at a more fundamental level. That can be applied to advertising, it can be applied to training, it could be applied to education. It's a powerful, powerful idea, and it's a fantastic idea for anybody who wants to communicate to an audience and have that communication remembered. So ultimately, my summary of that first point is presence is transformative. It's able to transform an audience to a degree that other media cannot do. And that's why it's going to be a really, really big idea. Second idea is immersion. No prizes here for me talking about immersion at a VR event. I'd be surprised if I didn't really. But if I look around here, I can probably count 80% of you on the phones. Not actually literally speaking on the phone, but you're probably tweeting or YouTubing or swiping left and right on Tinder or something like that. And the point is that it's very difficult for anybody who's trying to create a communication to actually talk to an audience uninterrupted. We live in a multi-channel age. Any advertiser who creates a piece of communication has to consider that it's got to get through all these meta channels of communication and all these distractions. VR, on the other hand, kind of cocoons you. To be successful, it cocoons you from the distractions of your real life. You put on a headset of some sort and you go somewhere else. And for it to be really successful, the presence to really work, you've got to leave the distractions of the old world behind. Now, again, that's a tremendously powerful idea for anybody who wants to talk to an audience at any level, whether you're an advertiser or otherwise. The idea that you can actually get people's attention in this world of distractions and multi-channel media is a really powerful and valuable idea. Again, it's going to be something that I think will play a lot in terms of communication in advertising in particular. It's important to say that that isn't the only way presence will work. There's obviously lots of presence kind of ideas, but Morpheus, the Play Labs are doing a really interesting thing where they link your world to the world of the game. Here they link it with the controller itself. Really lovely, lovely ideas where it becomes an interactive element and it links you really nicely to the world. But I think this is a different level of presence we're kind of operating at. I'm talking about and I think this will be really successful, by the way. There'll be lots of layers of different interactions in VR, but the interaction where we really want the audience to go somewhere. So, for example, as Ian mentioned about going somewhere historically, I showed an image of the presence of the Holy Festival at the start, where you really want to go somewhere and just be transported. You've got to leave your old world behind. All those distractions have got to be left behind. Therefore, wherever you're going, you're going to give your full attention. Again, a very powerful idea in advertising and any other communication. Because immersion demands your attention. It doesn't just ask for it. For it to really work well, you've got to leave your old world and all the distractions behind. Third idea, transience, represented by my little bee hopping around various flowers, and we'll get to all that kind of. It's probably fair to say, anyone who's again tried various types of media across VR, certain types of media just don't work. Linear, narrative forms of cinema, anything with an edit in it, kind of quite confusing. Certain elements of games don't really work that well at all. First-person games, etc., kind of counterproductive in many ways. So we're not going to be going straight to the forms of media that exist. New forms are going to start to emerge to sort of complement this type of experience. If you couple that with the fact that actually, physically, not everyone really likes VR for long periods. It's kind of uncomfortable. People sometimes get motion sickness for various reasons. Even when they go beyond all the technical sort of elements and barriers, I think these things will still exist. So if you couple those two ideas together, there is a suggestion perhaps that new forms are going to emerge, which are possibly not so intensive, maybe in terms of gameplay demand, simpler, perhaps, and less demanding of the audience, because it's quite an intense experience for many audiences, whether it's from the physical reasons or just from the types of content that actually work. So newer forms may be appropriate, shorter, maybe more experiential, but don't demand so much from audiences. Maybe forms that go from shorter experience to shorter experience and kind of take you to different places. And for me, that sounds very like the average commercial break, where you have a series of short ideas which might transport you from one idea to another, ask you to go with it for a while, and ask you to create an understanding of the idea and create a connection as a result, but don't demand too much from you as a user. Interesting, anybody who's seen the Epic Showdown demo, I think it's from Crescent Bay, it's an interesting piece for me. Not particularly, I think it's really interesting technically. It's not that personally successful for me as a piece of VR, because it kind of breaks the rule of vection in terms of I'm moving but I'm standing still, and that's a kind of fundamental for creating a real sense of presence. You move down this street, amazing street, with a kind of gun battle against a big robot, and it's not necessarily the content I was interested in, it's the idea of it just doesn't demand too much of you as a user. I thought it was an interesting idea in that it wasn't trying to be playable, it was just trying to suggest a sense of experience. And I wonder whether this type of content, as we go forward for advertisers, etc., might actually be the kind of idea that sort of emerges in terms of it's fun, we enjoy it for a moment, there is some element of interactivity, very limited at this stage, but hopefully it will get better. And then we leave. We don't spend too much time. Anyone who's done most of the demos on the various headsets, you know, and again, it's a personal thing, but the shorter, more experiential ideas which just are fun to interact with and don't demand too much actually seem to me at this moment to be more successful. So for me, and this is probably the most subjective of the 3 points, transience potentially really suits advertising formats. So it suits the idea and the things that advertisers are actually really good at, creating short experiential ideas for you to interact with a brand or a product. So, in a short summary, we've got a medium that transforms perceptions very powerfully, compels audiences' attention. For it to work, you don't have to give it your attention, but in some ways there's not a lot of point using it if you're not going to. And suits advertising formats. And speaking with my advertising head on, that is a big opportunity for developers, because creating the content that exists in these worlds is going to require all the skills that exist in companies such as yourself and individuals such as yourself. I'm not just talking the hard technical skills of how to create something in this engine or that engine, and those sorts of things. Actually, you can replicate those to a degree. I think there's something much more fundamental, particularly in the UK industry, but also real experienced game developers actually have, and they're kind of softer skills. And here's a few that I think are going to be relevant really. Building beguiling worlds, and I use the word beguiling very purposefully. Worlds where you kind of engage with, you want to engage in, you fall into. Worlds where you enjoy experiencing and connecting with and understanding the logic of the world and discovering what a world does. That can be something, that can range from the world of Portal to the world of Monument Valley, in terms of they've got different ways of interacting, they have their own logic, they have fun in terms of discovering how the logic works, and the logic continues and develops your understanding. Really interesting, just design-led ideas where people have really thought about what this world is and what the logic of it is, and why would somebody want to go in there and spend time there. You're experts in interaction. Over 25 years, at least, the UK industry particularly, has been interacting with lots and lots of people, learning the hardware, what works, what doesn't, learning that people will break stuff or try and do the thing that you haven't designed the game to do, find the glitches, etc. But in all that, you understand how people work and how people interact with the game, and how people interact when you present them with the world. And again, really important, soft skills, difficult to understand from an external perspective if you're not engaged in creating interactive content on a daily basis. And learning without instruction, I think this is really important. The idea of going into a world and not being told how it works, just discovering that idea. And I think that this is particularly important in terms of broader content. If you imagine you do enter into this world of creating content, this kind of central idea of advertising game content, you're talking to a truly broad audience who might be from 7 to 70. They won't really have the tutorial level to play. They might even experience this in a 30-second, minute-and-a-half burst. They don't really have that time to be led by the hand. They need to learn this world and what you're doing it really, really quickly and in a way which doesn't require instruction. It needs to be simple without being simplistic. Again, 20 to 25 years of experience of creating this sort of content, I think sets you up pretty well to sort of service this. Just an aside, I'm not suggesting that we make ads in VR. You know, I think there'll be branding experiences. I think there'll be something beyond advertising, and it sort of hankers back to my sort of first point about coming together to create something different. I think they will be pieces of short experiential content that furthers a conversation between an advertiser or a brand or somebody who wants to communicate to an audience. And in the interactivity and in experience and use of presence in this world, you will get something deeper than other types of media and communication. As another little aside, when I started writing this presentation, I used the epic showdown reference as an idea of, you know, quite a linear kind of use of VR. And in the time between starting writing it and this sort of presentation, more or less, the Samsung Battle for Avengers Tower came out, which is essentially a port of the epic showdown with the various super heroes from the Marvel world. And this is the current kind, I think this is where advertising currently will be for a while with this sort of content, a linear relationship with media where we kind of, it's a bit like a fairground ride. We go down and it's a 360 kind of space and you look around and it looks wonderful and it's a short experiential idea. But for me, the really interesting ideas that are going to come out are the ones that kind of go beyond this, where the interactivity comes into play, where you're not just travelling down the sort of roller coaster ride in this space. You've got an element of interaction in this space, much closer to a game, but it's not going to be a game. We're not making games here, we're making moments, we're making experiences. Now, it's not making games, I hear you cry mentally, I'm sure. Why are you standing up at Develop and Talk at Games conference and talking about not making games? Well, I mean, for the reasons that Ian said earlier, you know, we are going to, there's going to be a convergence in all this type of content really, where the boundaries are going to blur a little bit. But there are actually some quite practical reasons, I think, even though it's not making games, it can actually help you make games. And there's some of them are practical and some of them are more sort of creative and artistic, really. Probably the simplest one is revenue and project cycle. Depending on your business model, if you're a studio or an indie or whatever, you're going to have a sort of quite a long sort of arc of getting money to start your project, whether you self-fund it or you get investment, get some milestone payments, and the actual getting paid for your project. And actually that can be a long and sort of difficult process for a lot of studios. And so being able to sort of complement what you do with shorter bursts of commercial content creation, if you have that flexibility on your timeline, will allow you to help fund your bigger point of actually making games, you know, your kind of higher purpose, but also might allow you to make the game better. You know, if you can create a commercial project over a short period that gives you 6 months worth of funding to create your game 6 months, you know, to get the extra 10 points on a Metacritic score, that might be the difference between an average and a great game, and, you know, difference between a game being successful. So funding your game development with commercial projects may be a possibility depending on your flexibility. It doesn't work obviously for every studio, particularly if your, you know, publisher has got you working with something. Working with different people. Just working with people outside of the game industry. Doing things differently, having things questioned, having the purpose of what you do questioned. It can be frustrating, but it can be really rewarding as well to work with different people in different disciplines. And there's a wealth of creative talent in the UK advertising, particularly in branding industries, from art direction to writing, people who are working across multiple channels already in terms of communications. And it'd be wonderful to join these two disciplines together and actually see what comes out on the other side, because I think it could be something really special. And experimentalism. Back in the day when we were a production company, we used to have many directors, and they would often work on commercial projects to fund their feature work, and they've gone off to, so a couple of them gone to Hollywood and done quite well. And part of the value of working in the commercial space was actually to experiment, to use a camera technique, or to employ a performance idea, or a location, or a way of working that they haven't really thought through yet. And it was a way of refining that process, I suppose, and making it work for a purpose. And often they would take that and use that in their further career to create their true, their kind of their heart's work, I suppose. If you sort of follow that idea with games, you might want to be making a game, but you might have a really great idea sitting on a shelf somewhere, which is a technical idea, an art idea, which you can't find an outlet for. Commercial work could actually be that outlet, because advertising, as it matures within VR, like in any other sort of space, is constantly looking for invention and new ways to do things to stand out from the crowd. So there's a real possibility there that experimentalism could increase, and the variety of work and your skill sets, and possibly what you create could even spur something onto to appear in a game, for example. So there's some really interesting areas, I think, there. So in a short summary, I'm going to sort of crack on a bit, but in a short summary, I think that games and advertising are massively, massively talented industries in the UK. I think VR offers that real opportunity to join these two spaces together. And as a way of saying, we're not just paying lip service to this. I mean, I'd like to announce a small sort of little bit of extra activity that we're up to, which is a company working with developers to help this make the first sort of forays into this space, really. Their company is Reality Lab London. We are very new. We're working with some well-known developers and some very talented indies, and we are taking those first short steps into this space. And we're happy to sort of talk to anybody here who's interested in that sort of space further. Without further ado, thank you for listening. I'm going to hand over to Katie, who's going to take you through the exciting things that are actually happening at this moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Seamus. So my name's Katie. I work as a producer at a company called Inition, based in Shoreditch in London. An Inition are a company, we're a creative technology company, very much at the sort of forefront of the current wave of non-gaming VR content, and that's a wave that's very much been led by brands and advertisers. Here's a shot of our basement demo studio. You get in touch if you want to come visit. We have lots of open house events. It's not all we do, kind of VR non-gaming stuff. We do kind of, lots of other kind of bits of kind of creative tech. We also do a lot of sort of business-to-business stuff that Ian was talking about earlier in terms of architecture training, engineering, that kind of stuff. But today I'm going to talk specifically about kind of non-gaming marketing applications for VR. I previously worked with, in a previous life, with Seamus Maverick, as he says, kind of like wrestling real-time engines to make bits of marketing content, and it's a difficult thing to do. Taken a lot of what I've learned there and applying it to these sort of commercial VR projects, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Here's some recent stuff we've done in VR, and not so recent. You see there's a really broad range of clients that we've worked for, very much spearheaded by kind of fashion brands. We've done things for Selfridges, Topshop, Westfield. Automotive is a bit of a no-brainer, working for Nissan, Toyota, Jaguar, Land Rover. As well as, just everything from kind of standard adrenaline, extreme sports kind of stuff to alcohol brand launches. We've done stuff for medical congresses where doctors have to let doctors experience what it's like to have certain medical conditions to create some empathy with them. And maybe more eagle-eyed amongst you might notice that some of these projects can predate Oculus. Some Sony headsets going up there, and we've been working in this space for quite a while. Inition has been going since 2002, and we've learned quite a bit along the way. We've been working in VR since it was the most terrifying thing anyone had ever dreamt of. Back in the 90s, you see VR was horrendous. For anyone who's too young to remember, we just got over the 80s, threat of nuclear war. That came to the 90s. The biggest threat to global civilization was VR. But because we've been around for that long, it means that, you know, we've had some experience. We've kind of gone through several hypercurve cycles. And I think it's interesting to look at kind of what's different this time around, what makes VR kind of more compelling from us this time. As you can see, the sort of theory behind VR hasn't changed since sort of Victorian stereograph viewers. So what's different? I think there's some basic things around kind of economics and new technology, the fact that we kind of take things wholesale from the mobile phone industry in terms of high resolution screens and gyros. Those make things work, meaning that you can produce headsets very cheaply. We've got advances in motion tracking and motion capture technology. We thought that, you know, before Kinect came out, we'd have a basic sort of motion capture system in our living rooms, and that's been employed in the interfaces with things like Vive and now Oculus Touch. And we've got real-time game engines as well. It's taking big leaps and, you know, nice open source tech that we can use to create these sort of lovely virtual worlds. But I think there's one other reason why VR is different this time around, why it feels different this time around. It comes a little bit back to what Ian was saying about content, but to speak directly to why we're here at Develop, I think it comes down to you. I think it's really interesting that this time around, VR is kind of hitting a peak at the point where the games industry has fully matured. And VR as a platform needs the talents of people like you in order to succeed. It would be lovely to think that Facebook have bought a $2 billion games division. We know that's not the case. We know that they need to create compelling content for a range of audiences and a range of platforms. And you're the guys to deliver it. So if you think about where the games industry has come in the past sort of probably about 5 years or so, how it's broadened, how the audience has matured, how our skills and experimentalism have matured, we have to take everything of that and apply it to any type of VR content. From first and third person storytelling to real-time interaction in virtual worlds, these are the skills fundamental to success of VR, and I would highlight a few of those today, so hopefully you go away kind of fired up with all the things you know and can bring to this world. So I'll start off talking a bit about an old VR project. We did at Ignition back in 2012. I should have the video playing. Just going to check. So this was for Nissan at Goodwood Festival of Speed 2012. It was a skydiving experience. And interesting for me to note is just how rooted in the world of games design this was. We tried to make out it wasn't a game. We designed this kind of batshit crazy motion platform with big fans blowing in your face and did all these things. But really, you're moving through a virtual environment and collecting points. It's a game. Right now. Oh. Well. Skip over. I've been told we have to wrap up, so I've got lots of interesting things to say, and we'll look evilly at these people over here. Just giving me just do this. There you go. It's really sad, so we've got lots of really interesting things.
Yeah, we've got the next session coming. Oh, it's the next one.
Yeah, really sorry about that. Lots of interesting things to tell you about making VR for non-gaming clients. We've done some more, talk about abstract worlds and how we should be thinking more about the things that Monument Valley do, the things that Shoebox Diorama are doing to create those experiences. Definitely don't ever make virtual reality Tesco. It's a really important thing to take away from this. It's the worst thing anyone's ever thought of. Talk about creating empathy with the person. At the moment, all my clients want everything to be first person, and if it's not, and we haven't expensively comped in arms and legs and heads and somehow put a camera here, they don't want to know. But I think what you guys know about is the third person can be really empathetic, and I'm really excited about what's coming out of the games industry. And ideas about sharing as well. Again, things are sort of very literal at the moment. Let's talk about, Oddspace are working on how to share content virtually. I think we should be thinking more about things like journey and how we share experiences. I was going to wrap up by saying, we're at the start of the launch of a new platform and a new language of storytelling needs to be invented. We're going to look back probably in 100 years and go, well, people really like VR roller coasters, in the same way that people were scared of a train arriving in a station. Think of yourself as those early cinematographers grabbing cameras and going out and experimenting. Go back to Ian's kind of hype curve. As he says, technology-wise, we're coming out the trough of delusion. I think, yeah, I'm going. Content-wise, we're still up at the top. No one's created a killer app yet. We're still in the kind of gimmick phase. There's definitely an opportunity to experiment. Two amazing quotes. Essentially saying, you know, backing up what Jameson is saying. There's a big world out there. It needs experimentation. Seriously, from the briefs I'm getting from clients, it needs games people to bring their talents to it. It doesn't exist anywhere else. It doesn't exist in creative directors, film directors. This stuff sits with you. I'm really sorry I had to massively rush through this, but come and find me later if you want to talk to me.